Hey, good afternoon, everybody. So what I want to do here is walk you through our APV. I'm going to point out some of the features that we have. I'm also going to make comparisons to F5 just so you can kind of understand how we differentiate between F5 and also some other competitors. What I'll do is I'm going to take you through kind of the base configuration. Then we're going to focus in on SLB, server load balancing, and SSL offloading. I will touch on some of the other functions as well. So just to start, a lot of customers, what they're going to ask us is, visually, what can we see from your device? It's actually one of the big questions that we have today. So I'll show you here that we give each user of the appliance the ability to manage their own dashboard. So each user that's assigned a username and password on the device could come in here. They can add a graph, okay, basically take a look at what they want to see, okay, and this can be real time. It can also adjust it by date, okay, and time. From that, they could take these reports. They could export them out to a picture. Maybe they need to put a report together for a boss, or maybe they just want some statistical information. They can put it into like an Excel spreadsheet. So I just wanted to kind of start with that because that is one of the big questions that always comes up. From there, what I'm going to do is walk you down through the left-hand column. We're really going to focus in on the SLB, but I do want to mention some other things here. So under system, what we really want to focus in here is the access control. Things like Paul had mentioned before, we support XML RPC, we support RESTful API. There's just some functions that will allow from an external device you to actually get into the APV, pull information, and then actually have a response to that. So you could actually do some proactive response configuration. So they're the APIs that we were speaking of. In addition, we have our web wall. That's going to be our firewall for our appliance. Now, it does not do deep packet inspection, but if you were to put an interface out on the WAN, you could enable web wall on a specific port or bond and then do some firewall functionality on that as well. Stepping down into network, I want to talk a little bit about interfaces. The instance I'm showing you right now has 4 ports. Okay, these ports can be bonded together to increase your throughput. We can also support VLAN and also MNet. MNet is a way to actually add another subnet to the device if you do not support VLANs in your infrastructure. And you want to actually put a VIP on a different subnet, you could actually add an MNet interface. But this right here, we're showing 4 ports. With our largest models, we have up to 16 10-gig ports. The next thing I'm going to go down is into routing. Under routing, the thing I just wanted to point out was eRoute. So with eRoute, it gives you the ability to route out to specific gateways based off of a source or destination. We also have auto-created eRoute. So if you're going to be using our link load balancing, we can create an eRoute based off of the best path. Under NAT, we do support NATing. We also can support port forwarding. So in the case that you are putting some of these ports or interfaces out on the WAN, you may want to do NATing or port forwarding. We do give you that capability as well. For high availability, we can support up to 32 units in an HA configuration. We do support active-active and active-passive. So you can specify certain virtual services to be active on one unit and another set to be active on a separate unit. And then if one unit were to fail, all units, the one unit would handle both groups of virtual IPs. And we do also have session state failover. So that way the connection session information is replicated to all the devices real time. So that way if one unit does fail, all the connections would be picked up on the other unit without users being disconnected. And then we have certain health checks you can do, not just only on up-down, but you could do a health check on CPU usage, memory usage, memory spike. You could do it even on a gateway that might be down a few hops away. So we do support that as well. So moving into server load balancing, this is where we're going to spend most of our time. And what I really want to emphasize is the simplicity of the configuration. So when we look at something like F5, you really get involved in iRules and IAPs. And even if you do an IAP and you have that template and you get through it, in the end, you're still left with an iRule to manage. Our device is unique where everything's hard-coded. So everything you'll need to do is drop-down based. Okay, we're going to start with SSL. So you can kind of see how how we would actually go ahead and set up a virtual service or load balance and do SSL offloading. So under SSL, you'll see we have our virtual host, and then we have our real host. Our virtual host is for SSL offloading, and our real host is if you're going to do back-to-back SSL. So for this demonstration, we'll concentrate on the virtual host. You'll see that I have a virtual host added here, but just to show you how you would add that, you'd click on Add. You'd give it a name, you can enable it, and then you would create it. Once you create it, you'd come back to this screen here where you could actually click inside. Okay? You could generate a CSR from this, or you can import a certificate through the screen here. One thing that's unique now with our latest firmware release is that we support SNI. So if you have multiple domains, you can have multiple domains in one associated with one VIP. So that way, what we look at the qualified domain name, we assign the correct certificate. Okay, so this is going to help with cutting down those IP addresses that you have to delegate for a specific virtual service. And in conjunction with that, you could use our policy, our QoS hosting policy, which will say, okay, if you come in with this domain name, match this certificate, and then also pass through to these real services. So it's a really nice way to simplify the configuration and really consolidate. Under advanced options, this is where you're going to actually be able to select your SSL protocol. You'll see here I have TLS 1.2 selected. We also support TLS 1.0 and SSL v3. You'll see under my cipher suite, currently in this certificate, I only have one cipher suite, but you'll see it's ECC, and it's also using perfect port secrecy. But if I back out here a little bit, I can bring you into this test one where I actually show a full range. So you'll see here a full range of the TLS 1.2 cipher suites that we can support. And then you can enable and disable certain cipher suites and also prioritize which ones are going to be used first. So once you input your certificate or your certificates, you can come up to virtual services. And you'll see I have a number set up, but again, I'm just going to take you through configuring a new one. So if we were to hit Add, we could then drop down to the virtual service type. And today what we'll focus in on is SSL offloading, which would be HTTPS, but you'll see there's a number of others that you could choose from. Again, these are all hard-coded instructions, so it's not script-based, so it is also less CPU intensive. So if I click on HTTPS, I can give it a virtual service name. I can specify the IP address, IPv4 or v6, and one thing to mention is that we are full v6 capable. We also can NAT v6 from v4 to v6 and from v6 to v4. Specify the port, specify max connections if you desire, and then you can also select which virtual certificate you're going to use, and that was created from our last step. Once you have all that information populated, it'll actually create it, and it will bring it down into this screen. So what I'll do is I'm going to click on one that I've already had created. This one is actually for Citrix, and I can just show you some of the ease of configuration for some of the general things that you'd be doing. So if we click under HTTP settings and under HTTP redirect, if you wanted to redirect all HTTP to HTTPS, you could simply enable and save. Instead of creating an iRule to do that, it's a checkbox, essentially. In addition, we'll use Citrix, for example. We know that if you go to citrix.domain.com, a user would also have to end that with /citrix/storeweb. So instead of making that redirection on each backend server, we can do it in one place, and that's on our application delivery controller here. You click Add. You give it a policy name, a priority. You type the original host, which could be the IP address or the fully qualified domain name, the original path, which might be just slash, the protocol, the host, which it may be the same or maybe something different, and then you type in the new path, and you create that. Once you create that, it'll actually put this policy in, and now every time a end user or a client goes to the VIP, they'll automatically be redirected to the virtual path. So in addition to the simplicity of doing redirects and forcing people to use HTTPS, if there is a function or feature that isn't available on a drop-down here, we have our ePolicy engine. Our ePolicy is based off TCL scripting, so it's much like F5. So if you're familiar with F5 scripting, you can be familiar with ours. So anything that is not readily available, we could actually script in. So I would say about 90 to 95% of what F5 does, we can do without our ePolicy. We can do it simply through the hard-coded instruction. But for that other percentage, we could do that through ePolicy. So once the virtual service is created, we could drop down to Real Services. Under Real Services, you would add, much like what you did with virtual services. In this case, we would choose HTTP because we're going to do offloading. But you'll see there are many other selections here. So when I choose HTTP, I can type in the real service IP, the port on the real server, and then I can select a health check. So the health check, in many cases, some of the lower end products out there, they might do TCP or ICMP. One thing that we can do is HTTP. Not only can we check to make sure the service is up so that it's responding on maybe port 80, but we can also check against a specific page. So you may want to check against a specific page within the storefront server and make sure that responds correctly. And if it does, then we'll make this server active. But if it does not respond, we'll take it out of the group or make it inactive. So that's a nice feature to do a layer 7 health check. Okay? So once you create all your real services, then we're going to put them in a group. Okay, so basically we're going to say all these real services work together, and we're going to put them in a group. Okay, and we're going to define the method of that group. And this is what's really neat, because again, with iRules and F5, it's going to become very complex, especially if you're not familiar with F5, to do something like an iCookie, insert cookie. Now, from a simple load balancing, you have round robin and least connections. You might want to do persistent IP, but for something like insert cookie, we make it very simple. You can click on insert cookie, give it a name. You can specify the number of active real services if you want to limit it. Give it a cookie name. You can enable the path attribute, and then choose what type of load balance after we insert that cookie. So it might be round robin or least connections. Once you do that, we have this real service group, and then you can add your real services to that. So now we have a group method of insert cookie, and here's the real servers that are assigned to that group. So we make it very simple. Now we talked about health checks on the real services. We can also define health checks on the group itself. The nice thing about that is if you have a database server and your application servers have to talk to the database server and the database server is down, it really is no good for your application servers to be online if your database server is offline. So we can do a health check on that database server and then tell the real service group that if the database server is down, redirect all your users to a under maintenance or site currently offline page, rather than them just getting a timeout or an error. So that's a nice feature as well. So once we have our virtual services and our real service group defined, we can then go under policies and we can link them together. So what linking them together is going to do, it's going to basically say that I've got a insert cookie group, and now my policy type is going to be insert cookie. I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to link the virtual service. So if the virtual service was, say, ECW HTTP or HTTPS, whatever it might be, I'm going to link that with ECW insert cookie, and then I'm going to give it a precedent, and I can add that in. So once I've done that, my setup is complete. Now I'm actually load balancing. Okay. Now, in the case that maybe you have a storefront server, and you have a storefront server, but you want to proxy that. So you want to do a true reverse proxy from the outside to the inside. You could create a static policy and just specify that the VIP is set to match up with a specific real service or real server, which would be your storefront. So that's another way of handling this. So that being said, some of the other features with our device is we do support UCC, which I mentioned, SNI. We do support HTTP2. So if you have a web server that supports HTTP2, we can also support that. But if you have a web server that may not support HTTP2, you can enable HTTP2 on our APV and basically do HTTP2 offloading. So our APV can be designed to handle multiple requests and multiple responses, even though the back-end real service is not. You can actually increase performance. We also can do patching and compression. We also support WebSocket. And we talked about RESTful API and XML RPC. So there are a lot of the new features of our product here. Now, if we go down to the monitoring center, if you didn't set up your graphs, you could come down to the monitoring center, and we have some predefined graphs. You can specify the SLB virtual service, the real services, the group, or the global statistics. You'll see under real services, I have 2 that are red. It's actually saying that they're failing the health check right now. Okay, so you can be alerted to that. And then if you were to use our XML RPC or maybe RESTful API, you could make calls into the APV, pull that information out, or you could send the information over to a syslog server using our remote syslog server host, or even email alerting to let you know when there are issues. So outside of SLB, we also do support global server load balancing. Again, very simple to configure. Global server load balancing is nice if you have multiple data centers. So a lot of times customers will say, well, we have servers at location A, we have a failover site at location B, and they're replicating, so we're good to go. Well, the real issue is, well, how are you going to get the client or the end user from A to B? And you would do that through global server load balancing. So one of the things we do really well is handle that automation for you. So you can simply specify your A records, specify your services and pools, which are basically the IP addresses that are going to be assigned to that host name that I showed you above, and then the policies, which are going to define how the global server load balancing is supposed to respond. So you have passive, like an active site, a primary site, and a failover site. You could say that everything goes to the primary site, and if a health check fails, go to the backup site. Or you might want to do it region-based, and we do support that as well. So you could say that if you are on the West Coast data center and your internet providers out there, go that direction. But if you are on the East Coast, go to an East Coast data center. So we can support that as well. And that's all done through our health checks and our policies. And lastly, we do support link load balancing. So link load balancing in combination with a global server load balancing is unique because what you can do is bond multiple interfaces together. We would be the start of authority for your DNS. So we could automatically update those A records so that when traffic comes in, we'll automatically resolve the host name to the correct IP address. The last thing I want to review is just system logs, just to give you an idea of what we capture and what we can do. So we have our syslog host. It's a local syslog host. It'll hold up to 40,000 lines of information. But then we also have a remote syslog host. It's going to allow you to offload the syslog to a remote server. That way you can keep your historical information. If you're using something like Splunk, you could capture it in a nice dashboard. We also support email alerts, and we also support SNMP and SNMP v3. So that being said, that pretty much wraps up what I want to demonstrate. The other thing I just want to show you for those who may want to go further into this, we can set up evaluations, we can do a WebEx, but if you go down that route, All the information regarding our product is in the web UI, so you can get the user manual, the application guide, the CLI handbook, and RESTful API document. So it's just, if you ever do download a product for evaluation, know that number one, you have the support of our team here, but number two, all the documents are also provided up in here. And then on our website, there's a lot of deployment guides that will assist you with deploying things like Exchange and Link and SharePoint.